throughout the entire election season so far without any let-up whatsoever. With 3 weeks to go, I don't know, can you believe we got 3 weeks to go? It just is amazing to me that we are now on the brink of this election, which for so long seemed so far away. Maybe first off, an announcement about next week, just so we're all keeping track of the calendar here. Next week, we'll have a great lineup of experts, including Dave Helling from the Star, my colleague at the Kansas City Star, Burdette Loomis from KU, Bob Beatty from Washburn University will be here to sort of give us a sense of the race with about 2 weeks to go. That'll be next week here at 4 o'clock. We're going to run straight through to the election now as we go forward. So we'll give you a sense of exactly where the race stands with 2 weeks to go next week. But today, we're doing something very different. I think it's going to be a really enjoyable conversation, fun conversation, because Steve Jacques is just a fun guy. But we're talking about advanced man, advanced politics, the role of an advanced man in our political campaigns. Believe it or not, there's a real science that goes along with trying to set up presidential-style campaign events, a science that goes along with presidential candidate campaign-style events. Steve Jacques has been embroiled and involved with national politics for 36 years now, give or take a couple, right?
40.
And he's done hundreds of advanced events for presidential candidates, for presidents themselves, and he has the battle scars to show for all the stuff that he's been through. He's also the author of a book, Advanced Man, A Presidential Campaign Adventure. It's a novel that I would describe as very loosely based, is the cliche. I'm not sure it's even loosely based on Steve Jacques' experiences being a presidential advanced man over the years. It's a great read. If you're interested, you can see Steve afterwards for a copy. So that book again, Advanced Man, A Presidential Campaign Adventure. So welcome. So good to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here. It's always great to be here.
He's also a former Dole Fellow, sort of making his way back into the building again. So good to have him here.
I was one of the two first classes, first in the class here at the Dole Institute. Senior fellow, the last time that ever happened.
He's a pioneer, folks. That's what he is.
When we were starting it, and it felt, like we were creating something new. It was wonderful. It was a great experience to have, and Bill has created just a wonderful place here. I mean, this is his vision. They may have built the building, but he gave it its soul.
That's Bill Lacey, who's standing right in the back there, ladies and gentlemen, and I second that notion wholeheartedly here. Well, if you are a good advanced man, if you know what you're doing and you do a good job, chances are you might wind up playing poker with the candidate himself maybe a few months prior to an historic 2008 election. And that's where Steve Jacques found himself one night with a man named Barack Obama. What happened? How did you wind up there? How much money did he take you for?
Oh, I won. I think he won too a little bit. There were 6 of us. But they kept sending me back to Las Vegas. I kept saying, don't send me to Las Vegas. I don't like Las Vegas. I don't gamble. I don't do those things. So they kept sending me back. And I would beg to go, and then I would force the team to go stay in a Hampton Inn that was off the Strip, because you just can't function on the Strip. You got to be able to come and go. There's things. You just don't want to be on the Strip. So this time in June of 2008, they made us stay at Caesar's Palace. There was no other accommodations, and I hate Caesar's Palace. It's lovely. The rooms are great, but there's no television in the rooms. There's no coffee makers in the rooms. You got to walk a half hour to get to your car.
There's no television?
Oh, there is, but it's just like minimal. It's like, here's like one channel. It's like living in Russia. They want you downstairs gambling. And I just was miserable, just hated it. And we had to do events then down on the Strip. Try to do motorcades on the Strip in Las Vegas and try to find a place to pull a motorcade in. And it's extremely difficult to do. And so this one night I was feeling, they sent me to Caesars, and we were doing an event, and I wasn't really thinking much about the deal. They showed up, early on whatever the evening was, and the next day we had events, a small town hall, and then a larger town hall a little bit later on in the day. And we picked him up at the airport, took him to the rooms. He went to a suite, and the trip director and the press secretary came down and had dinner with me. And they said, well, we're going to play poker later. You know, no, you want to come play poker with us? I said, that's nice, appreciate it. No, I don't gamble. No, you want to? No, I said, what am I going to do? Watch?
He doesn't gamble. He gambles.
Oh no, I don't. Just don't do that. There's better ways to throw away your money. Get a kind of horrible drug habit or something. And Marvin, the trip director, said, no, you don't understand. We're going upstairs to play with the boss. And he asked if you wanted to come play. Oh, in that case, yes. And luckily, I had enough money. I had like $60 in my pocket, and went up and we started playing about 7 o'clock. And everybody put in $60, and we played through the evening. And at one point, I wanted to bring up business the next day. The View was going live in front of Caesar's Palace. The View. We could do a walk-on. We could do it like somebody back with Johnny Carson and Dean Martin doing a walk-on like the old days. We could have done a walk-on. It was like 2 weeks after Michelle had been on. And I had heard Barbara Walters tell the story on herself that she had forgotten that she met Barack. She met him, saw him at a party, and she said, she told the story on herself on the Tonight Show. I saw him at a party. I said, you should be on the show. He said, I was on the show. She said, I'm sorry I wasn't there. He said, you were there. So I had this great plan. We're going to do, we're just going to do an OTR, what's called an OTR, an off-the-record movement. And before we start with the morning, I wanted to do a walk-on. And the line was, and I'd have him, and I wanted him to walk on and say, I just came to introduce myself to Miss Walters. I'm Michelle Obama's husband. My name's Barack. Well, this is the summer of '08. It would have been great. And it was exactly the target audience we needed. It's, kind of middle-class women. It was perfect. Just go do it, gone. So I bring this up while we're playing poker. Bring it up another time. Nothing. We don't talk business. It's like, come on, this is the fun stuff. This is the fun stuff. So we've been playing poker, pretty for a long time, and I told him the story about how Franklin Roosevelt, early in his administration, played poker with some of the White House press corps. And when he lost, he would pay off his losses in checks, and nobody ever cashed his checks. And, Obama was sitting there, and I was at the end of the table, and he's sitting there like this, and I said, nobody ever cashed his checks? He gave me the big smile. So about 1 o'clock, we broke up, and we had an early morning. And he said, okay, what's the deal about tomorrow morning? He remembered. And I told him, I said, we do a walk-on, and here's your line. I don't think I referred to the Barbara Walters piece quite as strongly as I should have, but here's your line. I just came in to introduce myself. I'm Michelle Obama's husband. My name is Barack. He goes, well, that's a good line. No. I feel like I'd be stepping on Michelle because she'd been on 2 weeks before. Let me think about it. We'll talk about it in the morning. Okay. 7 a.m., I'm at his door when he goes to work out. I'm at his door. He walks out his door. He goes, what? And I said, The View. He said, I thought we nixed that. I said, no. We said, we talk about it. He goes, well, let me think about it. So I went down to Robert Gibbs' room, this press secretary. I said, go down and talk to him, because Gibbs agreed with me. He came back up, and he said he won't do it. He feels like he'd be stepping on Michelle. I just was beside myself. I stopped talking to him. I just kept my distance. We had we did a little thing at somebody's house, and then we did this small town hall meeting, and he could tell I wasn't talking to him. As he walked into the town hall meeting, he just walked past me, put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, it's okay. And I looked at him and I said, if we lose, it's because of this. I was miffed. So that's my playing poker. And I walked in with $60. I walked out with 120.
Well, that's good.
But it was mostly Marvin. Marvin Nicholson, the trip director, always loses when he's been gambling. So it's mostly his money.
Well, the View story is good, but you're sort of glossing over sort of the meat here, which was what kind of poker player is Barack Obama? Can he bluff? Is he strategic? What kind of player was he?
He's incredible. Because
In
he was calling all. First of all, he knew more poker games than I could possibly imagine. He always, okay, we're going to play this, and he'd explain it, and we'd do the poker game. So where'd you learn all this? He goes, Springfield. I said, what's Springfield? He goes, the state capitol. He goes, when he was in the legislature, they would play poker, and he knew more poker games than I could possibly imagine even existed. And but I stuck with it, and as I said, I won, so I felt pretty good. I always win when I'm playing poker. I don't think I took money from him though. But yeah, he knows how to bluff, and he knows how to, we're playing a friendly game, but it was still for money. But he was an excellent poker player.
Let's go back to what an advance man is. Give me the Wiki 101 version of what does an advance man do, Steve? What's your responsibility? and you're sort of like a nomad trooping across the country, setting these things up for 3 or 4 days and leaving, going out somewhere else, setting up another one. It is a grind. So tell us about, what do you do? What's your responsibility?
If most of the time these days you get 3 days, 4 if you're really lucky, but I've had as little as 20 hours to come to town before the candidate or the president or the vice president. And when you say set everything up, do all the logistics, that's the most basic thing you can think is you control everything. Why do you control everything? Because it's all aimed at what you're going to see in the media that day, so you can control the news cycle.
Or on
so
the TV screen.
What you see on television is what we produce. And our purpose in controlling everything, logistics, motorcades, hotels even for the press and for our own people, the logistics when you get inside an event, how the press gets to the event and the image they're given, and how the staff all get to where they need to be, and then the candidate, how well he's taken care of,
because
how well he's positioned.
You don't want the candidate sort of mingling with the media. You want to keep, there's certain groups you want to keep apart, right?
Yeah, when you're dealing with events, with large events, you've got many crowds to deal with. And the candidate is a crowd, and the press is a crowd, and the crowd is a crowd. And none of these crowds should ever intersect. I mean, they never can cross one another. The candidate, the press, you can play with the staff a little bit more, and they're kind of a crowd too, but they're more with the candidate. So each of these 3 groups is its own crowd, and they need to get into this area, into their areas where they need to be set. And once the crowd gets in, they're more of a prop to us, to me. I mean, you want to make sure that they have a good time as human beings, because they're going to talk about it later. But as far as I'm concerned, once they're in my sight, they're props. And you want to make sure that the press get them, and the press get the right visual, and you have a sense of what you're trying to achieve, whether it's a message that you're trying to do a visual on, or just a sense of place where the visual, will tell you we're in Pennsylvania, and it's the Pennsylvania primary, something like that.
I was going to say, you have to evaluate what the message is, and that maybe influences where the venue is going to be, and then that may influence how many people you want to be at the venue and what kind of crowd. I mean, how are you analyzing all this stuff?
Yeah, I can't explain it any better than to tell you that when you hit the ground, even in a place where you've never been before, you have to know all of those things. How many people are going to show up? How many people can you attract? If it's a rally, it's Katie bar the door, so you want everybody to come. But how many people are really going to show up at noon on a Tuesday, in South Carolina, Scepter, South Carolina?
How do you know that?
You just do. I don't know. It's just because you evaluate. It's a working crowd. What are the demographics? How many people? What age group are you talking about? Where do they work? Are they on shifts? Are people working 2 jobs in this area? Is there a lot of people with time on their hands? You just know it when you go in.
That's really important, because if you don't get that right, the first thing the media is going to point out, or someone like moi, is that Barack Obama showed up in Gatlinburg, South Carolina Tuesday to a room that was only 3/4 full.
Oh, deadly, absolutely
and that's the
deadly.
last thing you want to see.
I want to have an overflow of about 10 people on every event that I've ever done. I mean, I want to have just enough, but I don't want to have people miffed standing outside.
How nervous are you as the event is sort of filling up, whether you're going to have the kind of crowd that you expected to have?
Depends on whether it's for Vice President Mondale or President Barack Obama. I joined the White House staff during the Carter administration, 1978, on the Vice President's staff. I was 12. And I learned about not just crowd building. I mean, we were doing crowd building, but by the time I joined the Carter campaign in '76, that's what it's been 40 years. In '76, crowds weren't really a problem in the general election, so crowd building wasn't so much of a problem, it's more crowd management. I was doing Vice President Mondale when most people don't even know who the vice president is. Not only is it crowd building, but also it's how do you shrink a room? My first event for him was a fundraiser for somebody in Davenport, Iowa, that they decided to hold in the Coliseum Ballroom. Like during the day, a weekday. So I'm scrambling to get marching bands to come in, fill up space, and senior citizen seating areas that take up this much space, and plants. Advanced guys, the cheap way to go is to go with drapes, things like that. You want to try to avoid drapes where you can,
Why?
It's a cheap way to shrink a room. I mean, come on. It's a cheap.
And you're a pro, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, but then again, I mean, I think the people who are dealing with Tim Kaine right now are going through those problems much more than with Hillary, and certainly during the primaries when I was working with John Kerry in '04, you just knew what size room you just knew what size room. I don't know how you do that, but it's just the feel after all these years. And with Barack, Katie barred the door. I mean, I did his announcement when he announced in Springfield on, what was it, February 10th of '07. He came to me in Iowa, and I did his Iowa tour. And my first event was a town hall meeting in Cedar Rapids. And I got the biggest gym I could get with 2,500 people. I could have filled probably twice that number. So with him, it was never a problem. It was always crowd management.
That's got to be a thrill.
Oh, it was a stitch, but I always felt that he was going to win. So that helps, especially when I met him the day he announced for president. And same day I met Michelle, and I just thought, we're going to do this thing. And, I thought it was going to be a heck of a ride. And it was. It was 18 months or 19 months, whatever it was.
I was going to say, what is your relationship with the principal, with the candidate in this case? I mean, how well do you get to know him? Is there a professional distance you have to maintain? What was your first impression of Barack Obama and Michelle when you first met him?
You cannot help but fall in love with Michelle Obama. You cannot help but fall in love with that woman. She is warm and brilliant. And I think one of the first things I said was, because I just wanted to see if she's got a sense of humor, was something along the lines of, so the whole supermodel thing didn't work out, so you decided to become a lawyer? And she got the joke and she got the compliment. She goes, I never tried to do that. I was a jock. So I had immediate good feelings about her. And he was, he's easy to get along with. He's just always very easy to get along with. It's just.
But he's got that side to him, doesn't he?
Which side?
Well, you don't want to screw up.
No, but it was, my stomach was never in a knot when the plane was coming in. I mean, that's, it wasn't always my experience in the past. And so, there was a no drama. They said no drama Obama. It was a no drama campaign. You didn't want to screw up just because you didn't want to screw up for him, but not because you feared, that he was going to say anything. He can just be, kind of normally kind of cold. If he's done talking, he's done talking to you, and then he's gone.
Just like that.
Pretty much. I expected him to listen because I didn't come at him very often. When I came at him to tell him something during an event, I expected him to listen but he always got a kick out of letting me know that he already knew what I was talking about when I would tell him something.
When you would talk to a candidate when they needed to know something, Steve, you would tell them what kinds of things. Here's what's going to happen here today.
Yeah, it was at the very most basic part of it. You're given logistical tips, but through my years and just age, and now that I'm older than these guys, I'm much more bold in terms of giving, little advice in terms of talking points, who they're running into, who they're meeting, and what may relate to them and what may relate more to the audience they're talking about. So I'm a little bit more free with that, but he didn't need a lot of that. The times that I would give advice about something particular that was of local interest or some saying that was especially pithy. If he knew it, he got a kick out of telling me he already knew it. So.
Now that's one experience, Barack Obama, 2008. You've also worked for a man named Bernie Sanders, 2016. The floor is yours.
He is exactly in private as you see him in public. It was interesting. With the cameras on, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. That's just the bottom line. You don't put two curmudgeons in the same room together. I did 3 events for him. They had asked me to do his announcement tour, his announcement event in Vermont in 2015, and because I knew the director of scheduling in advance, and I begged off that and gave him another friend who had continued working for them all the way through the convention.
Yeah.
And he was here, actually. Jean-Michel Piget was one of my first guests when I was a fellow here. But I begged off. I said, if he ever comes to Kansas City, I'll be happy to help. So I got the call in January, February, whatever. I think he was coming to Kansas City with 2 days. And, okay, fine. We'll see what we can do. And I didn't try to get creative. I just chose the Bartle Hall downtown, and it's purpose-built. Got everything you need. You can pull a motorcade in. And they sent in the staff, and I was amazed. They were very, very, very competent staff. I didn't expect to see that. I thought they'd be, just kind of fly-by-night kids. And they were very competent. And they had a system. And my friend, who was director of scheduling in advance, had a great system worked out. So they were able to truck in all the supplies we needed to put on a major presidential, nationally televised event. It's a major production. It's a moving television studio. And we got it done, and it was successful, and it was fine. And We got a photo. They sent me a photo from the airport from when he arrived, when I introduced myself, and both of us have just the worst look on our faces. It's just like this is agony.
What was it agony for him?
Well, I didn't get that impression so much as I didn't get the impression that he took much joy out of it. I think he was driven by passion.
For the issues.
Yeah, for his issues and for his and for I think he got to enjoy the attention. I think he got to enjoy the crowds, and it's motivational. And listening to yourself speak is extremely motivational. Time goes extremely quickly, so I thought I was done with Bernie after that event, and then they called and they said, well, could you do another one? Okay, fine. Topeka or Lawrence. So I chose Lawrence because it's closer to my house. We went to the Douglas County Fairgrounds, which they loved because it was, it was different. It was an agricultural, a cattle arena, and I knew it'd have good acoustics. I look at these things because it had a dirt floor in it, and it was just about the right size. We could have gotten it bigger, but you're constrained. Where can you find places to do these things with 2 or 3 days lead time? It's just ridiculous how we put these things together so quickly. So when we got there, and because it was short lead time, there's never enough magnetometers, so there's always a long line of people waiting to get in because you can only put so many people through a magnetometer. And the Secret Service, for anybody who's listening on, from Secret Service, never sends enough magnetometers in the first place because they say you can put 400 people an hour through magnetometers. Well, if they were naked and running, they couldn't put 400 people an hour through those magnetometers. So we got an immediate mathematical disconnect right there. And then if it's wintertime and people have coats on, it takes even longer. So by the end of that, he knew that there were people waiting, and we finally got everybody in, but at the beginning he was visibly not happy about that. I won't say what he said. It's in private, I'll tell you. And, but I didn't take it personally because I didn't think it was aimed at me. And then they called and asked me to do another one, and it was, they decided on, so just go to Springfield, to Missouri, because it was Missouri primary. Go to Springfield, it's the third largest city. Now we'll go to Columbia. Fine. With 2 days, I go to Columbia. Get there on a Thursday morning.
He remembers
at noon.
these things. Yeah.
I spent till 1 o'clock at night looking for a venue. I mean, it's nuts. And finally find another livestock arena that's on the campus at MU. Everything in Columbia is basically on the campus at MU. I mean, all the venues, and if not, they're 2 seconds away. So anyway, I got that at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm up at 7 a.m. to go to the university, get it vetted, and to have our campaign vet it and get it agreed. We'll use it. So I got them to agree to rent it to us and called the campaign, vet it. What could go wrong? You got to call it noon. Well, you might want to hold off on that a little bit. Why? Well, there may be some problems. Well, they equated MU, I don't know who necessarily in the campaign, somebody at a higher level, with Black Lives Matter. And Bernie had a problem with Black Lives Matter last year at Seattle, and apparently they were concerned that they would go through that. Well, it's not Black Lives Matter at MU. It's 950, 905? Forgive me, I forgot the name, but it's a different organization that's aimed at
I know what you're talking about.
the administration. And they're Bernie supporters. I get 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to have to move it. Still, we got 4 o'clock doors open on Saturday, and this is at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Actually, at 4 o'clock, they called it down. And we had everybody, Secret Service, everybody just goes trundling down to Springfield, Missouri to do this thing. So then we find another venue on the way. And we started at 7 o'clock on Friday night for a 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we pulled it off. And 8,000 people showed up. I won't go through all this stuff, but midway through the afternoon on Saturday, I got a phone call from the campaign. Would you like it if Danny DeVito came? Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great, Danny DeVito. Fine, we got him arriving at 7 o'clock. Perfect. I'll have somebody, I've got friends in Springfield. I used to live there. I'm picked up in an hour and a half making those things and making those. I get a call, okay, fine. He's coming in at 7 o'clock and he's flying in by this airline. Excuse me, it's Springfield, Missouri. They don't get airlines at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. Are you sure he's coming to Springfield? Well, it says Kansas City International. I said, well, if you put him on a jet and brought him down here to get here in time to wave goodbye. So Danny DeVito didn't come, and I had to call my friends and say, okay, stop cleaning your car. You're not going to pick up the engine. And because of the move, we went from a smaller venue to a larger venue, and all the people, we ended up with very few magnetometers. There were a lot of people outside, and Bernie was not pleased. I'll go.
To put it mildly.
To put it mildly, yes.
And what
I do. I used to. I mean, more proximate to the time, I did a really good Bernie impression. I won't do that here.
But he was not pleased, and he directed some of that displeasure at moi, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was real fun, right?
You don't put two curmudgeons in the same room together.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind taking the heat if it's my fault, but I'd explained it that this was basically our fault, and there's nothing you can do when you got guys with guns and badges running the magnetometers. You don't go prod them and say, I mean, they'll go slower just to gig you, so you don't go try make it faster. So this was a self-generated problem, and I let him know that in no uncertain terms.
How did he take that?
Not well.
Yeah, no.
Not well.
So you've worked for Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama and John Kerry and Walter Mondale and Jerry Litton. I'm going to ask you about Jerry Litton in a few minutes, former U.S. Senator to be, perhaps, from Missouri, who died in 1976 in a tragic plane crash. Who else you worked for?
Well, along the same lines, Mel Carnahan, but going back, Jimmy Carter in '76, after Jerry Litton was a congressman in Missouri who ran for the U.S. Senate in 1976, and won huge over big competition
on primary night. Big upset came from nowhere. Then his plane on primary election night, he was flying to Kansas City. The plane went down up in Chillicothe,
Yep.
and perhaps some people say a future president of this country died in that accident.
Everybody up there says, still to this day, he would have been president someday.
Everybody
And I
says
traveled
that,
with
yeah.
him throughout that campaign. So I kind of missed that little part of the action, thank goodness. But after that, the Carter campaign called and asked me to come down to Atlanta for scheduling an advance seminar. I didn't even know what advance was. And they brought about 130 of us down and hired 30 of us to be new Carter advance people. So that's when I got my start doing advance for Jimmy Carter in the general election of '76. And then joined the White House staff in '78 as a full-time staffer for Vice President Mondale doing advance as well. And I've done every one ever since, every campaign. It was Carter Mondale in 2000. I mean, in 1980. Then '84 it was Hart in the primary and Mondale in the general. '88 did a few Dukakis trips to keep my hand in. Same thing '92, a few Clinton trips to keep my hand in. And then '94 I went full-time working as a White House consultant doing advance for Gore and Clinton through 2000. Through '98 when I was appointed Director of Communications at the State Department.
Truth be told, you were almost, it almost came to be that you were on Jerry Litton's plane that night.
I wouldn't go that far. Wasn't that close. But the guy who took my place that night, because I was doing Get Out the Vote in Springfield, Missouri. I'd left a few days before that to do GOTV in Springfield, where I'd lived before. And the guy who took my place missed being on the plane by 5 minutes because he was a nice guy and he gave up his seat to the pilot's son.
Yeah. Of all these different people you've been with, many of them did not become president or did not win their races. As you look back on it, based on what you knew about them as you got to know them, would some of them have been great presidents just based on watching them work day in and day out?
I think they all have the potential, at least on the Democrat side. I'm not going to speak to the Republican side. I think on the Democrat side, they all have the potential. Greatness is determined, I think, by circumstances. They certainly had the intellect. Mondale, brilliant guy, quiet, Minnesotan, Norwegian, unassuming. We've had him here. I had him here with Bill. We did a program from this very place. Gary Hart, also a bright guy. I think they all have the intellectual capacity. You don't get to that place. It's like professional entertainers don't get to where they are, by being bad. They're usually better than the rest of us. Same thing with politicians. Same thing with government office holders. They're usually pretty good at what they do. And I think they are mostly well-motivated. So, there's no question in my mind that Al Gore would have been a better president if he'd been elected in 2000 than what we got. But I'm biased, obviously.
Why politics? Where did that come from in your life? It obviously bit you as a young kid. Where did that come from?
Don't know. I started working in politics when I was 10 years old. A friend of mine and I would go down to the South St. Louis Democratic headquarters on Grand and go volunteer. We're doing, stuffing envelopes and going door to door and things like that. I don't have a clue what brought that on. It just was always it was just always something I wanted to do. It's strange. And I was always glad for it. I mean, once I was old enough to realize that, that at least having some kind of a mission in life is better than not, I figured, well, that's as good as any. Maybe I can keep working, until I'm old.
Yeah. What's the difference, Steve, between doing advance work for a president versus a presidential candidate?
It's changed through the years, but when you're doing advance for the president, the resources are remarkable. And now even more so. It's just remarkable. Our footprint has just expanded immensely. But once you get to the presidency, you've got obviously Secret Service resources in a much broader way. Stupid, simple things. Having a podium at your event, you've got White House Communications Agency. They take care of all the audio. They bring the Blue Goose, this big, heavy, 2-ton, whatever it is, armored podium. You don't have to think about it. It just shows up at your events. During campaigns, you're getting volunteers to tote podiums and, in vans and get them to where you need to be. Audio is taken care of.
But this podium isn't your little typical wooden little podium.
No, it's a 2-ton armored job.
So if something happens, the president would be protected. At least that's the theory.
Oh yeah, all the armor that goes around and all, they bring all that stuff. The resources are just immense once you're the president of the United States. I think the most difficult advance to do is First Lady advance, because you get presidential resources and, as I said, White House Communications and Secret Service. And if you're coming into an Air Force, to a military base of any kind, everybody's saluting and saying, yes, we'll do that. Vice President, the resources really go down quite a bit. You don't have to have your finger on the button, if you're the vice president all the time. But then you get to the First Lady, and I think the media and the public scrutiny is almost as high as the president. The attention, I'll put it that way, scrutiny, but attention is almost as high as the president. But the resources have dropped down to here because you don't need the same White House Communications Agency. You don't have the same national security needs, things like that. So I think the most difficult is the First Lady. But it's fun to do the president. It's, you've got, when you're doing a lead advance for the president of the United States, you're keenly aware of it. When we did our first presidential event, I think I did his first one in the White House in 2009. As I was going home, they sent me down to Florida. They asked me to do a Florida event. And this massive homunculus of an official vehicle is where the OV, the limo, shows up. I'd never seen it before. It was the new official limo. It was the size of a tank. Unbelievable. Big armored wheels, tires. So, we're in a new realm now. That's the first time I'd seen that massive one. When you're doing the President of the United States, when you're doing a joint trip, and it's the President and the Vice President usually shows up first. It's an impressive looking plane that shows up. Air Force 2, pretty nifty, shows up. Then Air Force 1 shows up. It's like 10 times bigger. You know who's the President and who's the Vice President.
It's a beautiful plane.
It's a great plane.
Yeah. I also was wondering a little bit about, we mentioned this before, but I want to emphasize the point. This is doing presidential candidate campaign work for a campaign. This is a grind. This is very little sleep. Every 3 or 4 days you're on, you have to produce this event. It's being watched by the free world in a sense. Everyone wants to see what this candidate is doing. I mean, how did you handle that in terms of just the grind of day after day of doing what you had to do?
You literally get into the routine. I mean, this is the normal stuff that every 3 days you're going to have a nationally televised media event, at the critical times, and especially in January and February and March of the primary season. It's just going constantly. Every time I was lucky enough to get sent back to Kansas City every time that Obama did an event here, and I'd usually call him, and I couldn't tell him that I was here to do an event, but I'd tell him, yeah, but when I'm seeing people on the road, I tell them, if you see my face, you're probably going to see Barack's face in about 3 or 4 days. And I couldn't tell you that I couldn't spill the beans, but we'd have lunch. What are you doing? Nothing, just came back to town to visit. Yeah. And then 3 or 4 days later, Obama would show up. It is a grind, and I could tell the first day, as a matter of fact, that I had a conversation with Michelle Obama the very first day, and they brought all their family, and Michelle, and extended family, after the first event, and then they were just getting into the second event, and we still had an evening's worth of events to do. You could tell they were pooped. They were pooped. They were ready to go home. It's like, okay, this is enough. We go, and I talked with Michelle, and she goes, I don't know if how I'm going to be able to do this for this long. And I said, believe it or not, you'll get into a routine. You'll get into a routine. And she did. I saw, a few months later, she goes, yeah, you just get into it. And you get on a plane and you go to the next city and you set it up and, his plane is going to show up whether you're ready or not. So you just do it. And it's always, I don't think I've ever done an event where I wasn't worried at the beginning that I was going to be able, I was going to actually be able to pull it off. Just finding sites is, when you're doing that, if it's the president, more often than not, you have a site set. Candidate, not so much. And just finding sites is just, it'll drive you crazy.
I can tell two stories. Okay, one time when you bailed me out big time, I'm going to tell this story. But what he's saying about the grind of a presidential campaign, when Senator Dole was running for president in '96, I was on with the traveling press corps sometimes. And let me just tell you my experience, because it was jarring. This notion of, you fly into a city late at night, it's 10, 11 o'clock, you're up having a beer with your colleagues till midnight or 1 o'clock, and then bag check is at 4 a.m., okay? And this is not just one day, it's that way every single day. And I never was around long enough to get into that groove that Steve is talking about. It is just mind-numbingly exhausting. And the planes, for what it's worth, you're used to flying on a plane and the stewardess comes on and says, fasten your seatbelts and all this stuff. On these chartered press planes, no one fastens any seatbelts. The booze is flying. People are rolling oranges up and down the aisles. And there's stuff all over the place. It is absolute pandemonium. And you've never seen anything like it before. It's just it's like Animal House in the air, is what it's like. But my other, true life experience, the day he bailed me out, it was 2008. Barack Obama flies into Kansas City, into the old downtown airport, and I'm the star guy covering the visit of the man who's going to be the next president of the United States. Well, it was late in the campaign. I was tired, I guess, and I thought I was supposed to be at the downtown airport at 5 o'clock, and I show up I was supposed to be there at 4, I showed up at 5. And this is no exaggeration. I pull up to the old downtown airport to park my car and then go through and get in the motorcade. As I'm pulling up to the downtown airport in front, here comes the motorcade from behind the building, ready to go to 31st and Gillum, where Barack Obama's headquarters was in Kansas City. And as a reporter who's supposed to be in that motorcade, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I'm thinking, oh, you know what? This is a horrible thing. And so I'm thinking, what do I do here? I sort of get as close to the back of the motorcade as I can. I have no idea where they're going at that moment. They wound up at 31st and Gillum. But I'm just sort of following them. They're going to, ultimately, he was going to give a speech at the Liberty Memorial, one of the biggest speeches in the history of Kansas City for a presidential candidate. It was a beautiful night, fantastic setting and everything else. But at that moment, I didn't know where they were going, so I'm sort of following them from a discreet distance. Finally figure out they're going to 31st and Gillum. I park a few blocks away, and I've got to get inside the headquarters, which of course has been completely cordoned off. Obama's inside with campaign volunteers. They're making phone calls, and I've got to hear this to write my story the next day. And I can see him through the glass from a little ways away on the phone, going like this, talking to people. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I'm losing it here. Finally, I sort of see Steve through the glass, and I'm able to sort of tap on the window a couple times. He's talking to Obama, talking to other people, and I keep tapping on the glass. And Secret Service guys are getting really anxious, but I've got tags here. I keep knocking. Finally, he sees me, and he goes, what are you doing out there? And I go, come inside. He goes, oh, come here. He brings me around. Okay, Billy's okay. He can come in. And I came in, and I was able to witness the last half hour of Obama making phone calls. But if you hadn't been in there, I wouldn't be sitting here today for what that's worth. It was that kind of experience, You remember that?
I do remember that. It's one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It entailed, let him in.
Yeah.
Let that guy in.
That's
okay.
all.
He's okay.
It was a small gesture on your part, a huge moment in my life.
If you got the hard pin, you can do anything on those trips. The Secret Service gives out the hard pins.
Yeah.
You got to, as the lead, you should be able to do that stuff.
I want to open it up to your questions here. Just a final question before I do that. The one thing you don't want to do in your position is screw something up. Crowd too small, have some interaction between the media and the candidate that you wanted to avoid, because that would completely swamp whatever carefully staged event you just tried to pull off. Talk to me about that. Tell me about screw-ups, how badly you wanted to avoid them, and maybe some time when you did screw up.
Happily, I don't have too many of those stories. People are on their better behavior, and I think it helps to have Secret Service around. So the stories, the screw-ups, happen more often before you pick up Secret Service, less often after you pick up Secret Service. Having those guys around can be helpful, as well as to make life more difficult in some ways. But they are friends of mine. The Secret Service, I get along with those guys wonderfully. They're helpful. Anyway.
But you don't mess with them.
No, but they know my job and I know their job, and basically it's not a big problem. I mean, I know what they're looking for and they know what I'm looking for. And if it's a negotiation, generally I'm going to get my way because I control the body, and it's about getting votes, and they really can't mess with our politics to any great extent. If it's a disagreement and you really feel like it's going to affect the politics, the message, your ability to get things across, you argue that point.
But sometimes it was a negotiation.
Oh yeah, there's always negotiations about little things.
And you'd be negotiating things like, they'd be saying to you, what, we don't want him walking here or there, or what was it?
Yeah, usually during the advance. I mean, if there's something really, I love to get creative. I love to do things that are a little bit different. And if it entails putting the protectee in a situation that they think they just can't control, that is not controllable, they're going to try to not have that occur. Now, things do happen. I had I think it was during the campaign, at Barack Obama. Yeah, it was during the campaign. Barack Obama down in University of Texas, way down in the southeast corner, Brownsville. And we decided to do several OTRs. And Obama first thing he says is, apologize to, the detail leaders, apologize to Jim, we're going to do these things. And it was wild. And it was going to an outdoor kind of Hispanic festival with food, and he got some kind of a big taco and was eating that, and that's just totally unscripted. You're in public, and then going and looking at the border, literally across the Rio Grande. So he's looking across to Mexico, to another country. Well, Secret Service doesn't control over there. They can't deploy over there, and and they didn't like that in the least. And then we did. I think that was pretty much it. But it was so hectic that a couple of these things, we piled into, I'm always in the lead marked car in the motorcade, and we all piled in so quickly, there were three of us in the back seat, and I couldn't close the door, so I'm holding the door, closed as we're going to these various places.
You go very quickly, by the way.
You move, but you don't go dangerously fast. When you're on the highway, 5 miles an hour over is as far as they're going to go. They won't do anything dangerous. I've been to a couple places where it went too quickly because of local cops going too fast, or overseas when it's dangerous. They're not fond of that. Saudi Arabia, we almost had a huge accident with the motorcade. They're just going 100 miles an hour on the highway in Saudi Arabia. One part of the motorcade tries to go this way, another part of the motorcade tries to go this way, and there's a bridge abutment in the middle. And the staff van almost clipped it and was almost destroyed. Anyway, it was the wildest ride they said they'd ever had. But there are 1,000 things you cannot anticipate that could go wrong. Obviously, you want to control all those things you can possibly anticipate. Personalities, you've got a local mayor who thinks he's a big shot. And, he decides that he wants to go this way, and so they go, I want to show you this. And you don't want to make a scene in public with the press around. Things like that you try to control with various barricades and putting people in the right areas so they don't have the opportunity to make those suggestions. And then just ongoing things. I've got a longer story to tell about the Mexican Independence Day parade in Santa Ana with Jimmy Carter in '76, with Governor Jerry Brown. I could make it brief, but Mexican Independence Day parade in '76 during the general was considered one of the biggest screw-ups. Election night in Georgia, we had an advance T-shirt that was made with all the screw-ups, and it was listed number 2 of all the screw-ups. So, and to boil it down, it was a 1.5 mile long parade route with nobody standing along this parade route, with Governor Carter walking with Governor Jerry Brown from California, 200 members of the National Press Corps in cattle trucks in front of them taking pictures of this. And one of them, Barbara Hauer, I remember her name, I don't know why I remember that. She was a gossip reporter back at the time. She starts mooing like a cow. They all start mooing like cattle. So there'd be a pocket of people here and a pocket of people here. And the trip director, Jim King, is on his microphone. He can broadcast. He starts play-by-playing it. Ladies and gentlemen, the people you see mooing like cattle are members of the National Press Corps. Let's give a round of applause. It was Governor Carter at the time was not happy. We got a mile and a half. We get to the end of the parade where everybody is for the speeches, where the speech stand is, and the two cattle trucks pull up right in front of the audience. So the people can't see over the cattle trucks to where Jimmy Carter is going to speak. And the mayor of Santa Ana, it's like 2 weeks after there was a Playboy interview that got him some press where he said he had lust in his heart. And the mayor of Santa Ana said, let's give a lusty welcome to Governor Jimmy Carter. Well, now keep in mind, I'm the kid. There's like 18 people on this advance team, and I'm like the number 18 kid. I mean, I was a kid. So I wasn't the guy that Jimmy was looking for to blame for all that. But it was an ongoing, and then he went to a barbecue later, and Steve, a member of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young was there with tequila, with tequila all down his front. I mean, and he's talking to Jimmy Carter, he's drunk. It's like, oh my God. And the motorcade, because Jerry Brown had come with Governor Carter, the driver expected him to leave with Governor Carter. So when the motorcade left with Carter, Jerry Brown's car left with it. So Jerry Brown is left there at our event, going to the airport, going to wherever, and I'm behind in this trailer we use as a press office, the holding room. And he comes up and he's got a date, this large, tall redhead, just miffed as he could possibly be, and we gave him one of our cars, one of our rental cars. We never saw it again. I said, here, take this. It's over there. So he takes off in the rental car. Those things happened more often back in the 70s, it seemed, but I seem to control my situations more, after I started doing leads in 78 when I was still a kid for Vice President Mondale. And
Leads being you're the head guy.
Yeah, I've just been doing leads ever since. And I was a kid. I was 25 doing leads for the Vice President and the President.
Just to continue this stream, in your book, Advanced Man, there's a scene between Bix, who's the lead character, who's sort of like you, I think, and yeah, he is, and a fire marshal at an event, and each of you had your own agendas. Do you recall what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, I opened with the fire marshal thing because you cannot control this. There are things that you cannot control, and you got to know the difference. And one of those things you cannot control is fire marshals. And you don't want a tragedy to occur.
Because you don't want too many, there's only a limit to how many people you can get in any room.
Well, they think.
They think.
If you can keep them distracted long enough with various ways, but usually they're pretty hard and fast about it, and you can argue all you want, but once you reach your limit, that's the limit. Now there's a lot of times when we push that limit, and so I look to do outdoor events where I can, just because the limits are it's a little less constrained, and you don't want some tragedy to occur at your event. That's kind of a basic and advanced. Don't have any tragedies.
How about your questions out here? Yes, yeah, Bill. TJ, you got a microphone, Bill. Yeah.
By the way, I've read your book. It's outstanding. I'd recommend
I
it.
appreciate it, Bill. Thank you.
With the Obama campaigns, of course, you were going nonstop and doing some of the biggest events that have probably been done in our lifetimes as far as presidential advance in terms of crowds. How would you compare this year's campaign in terms of the size of the events and the number of the events and how they're having an effect on the two campaigns?
This one is truly unique. And I think the role of Advance, first of all, Advance has gotten a little bit more controlled and constrained as time has gone on because of technology. Headquarters can control you out on the road much more than they used to be able to. And in '76, we were told to keep a roll of quarters in our pockets so we could call the headquarters if you had any questions. So them getting a hold of you, they had to trust you. You made these decisions and they trusted you. Now, they don't trust you so much to make a lot of these substantive decisions. So it's become much more controlled to begin with. And the visuals are much more rote. It's X number of people behind them and then the banner behind that. And the times when I see things occur, just the other day, Michelle Obama, when she gave her wonderful speech just 3 or 4 days ago, whatever it was, 3 days ago. And when you saw the wide shot, they were doing verticals. It was a big, I'd have to take a certain amount of pride in that because I think that was my influence with the Obama people is when you've got big, you've got tall, you go tall, you go big. And so they were doing a lot of verticals.
Explain that a little more.
As opposed to just some stinky little 8x12 banner behind the first of all, the press keeps taking tighter and tighter and tighter shots.
Right.
They don't want to be a
Yeah.
non-paid political ad, so they're not showing the whole scene with all the balloons and babies and red, white, and blue and all that stuff. So they keep taking tighter and tighter shots. So in the early 90s, we invented basically step and repeat banners where you could see the message real close behind, so no matter how tight they got, you could see what the message was. That's become much more controlled and contained. But my point was, when you're doing advance, if you gave the press a visual that they can't not take, and usually it's a spectacular big visual. And when you're outside, you go grand. Topeka, were you there, Topeka, for the Brown versus Board of Education thing? You were, in a day and a half time, I had 25-foot banners put on the Capitol grounds, created and put on the Capitol grounds that said opportunity, education, opportunity, whatever it was. 3 banners that were tall that really just said it all. I was known for the, when you saw the tall banners, those are usually my events. They were always my events. We did it for the Obama inaugural. If you saw the inaugural whistle stop, I was deputy director of the inaugural committee. So we split it up into days. The first day was the whistle stop, and we did events along this whistle stop. The last one was Baltimore, and we did the big, tall American banners behind them when they walked out of this hall in Baltimore to the big rally. But you will notice they're taking fewer and fewer wide shots, and the difference between past campaigns and this campaign is the personalities are so well developed, so well known. It's always about personalities anyway. It's not about issues. It's about emotion. It's always about personalities. These ones are really dominating the news cycle. So the visuals, I think, are much less important than they ever have been. You're seeing the same size crowd and the same number of events, but the focus is much more on the personalities, on the words, on the scandals. It's been nonstop, and it's just like watching a train wreck. I mean, so you're not really seeing that much else other than these people talking. Every once in a while, as I said, you saw the Michelle event with really great production and the tall banners with this, the American flag. It's like this right in the middle, and then the message banners on either side that were tall. It's advance. The role of advance, I think, now is more to make sure that nothing happens that's wrong, because the visuals are so rote. They're so controlled, so rote, and the personalities, it's personality driven. You get back to a situation where the people aren't as well known, the personalities. You're going to see a situation where you want to have the full visual to give you that whole message when you don't know the candidate as well. So I think 2020 or beyond, you may see more of that, even despite the controlled scenarios that you're seeing now. They don't want to take any chances. You're not seeing Hillary out doing things that are kind of uncontrolled, street walks, things like that. Those are the fun things. I brought Bernie when we did the event here in town. Brought Bernie downtown to Massachusetts Avenue. They said, we need, he was early. What do we do?
You got a haircut, didn't
Yeah, he walked in and got a haircut. So I suggested the Dole Institute, or we'll take a walk. Well, we'll take a walk. I kind of figured that'd be the case. But I'm on the phone with Bill saying, hey, if he came over, would you host him? So, but we did the fun walk, and immediately went in and had a haircut taken. I mean, those are the fun things that really make the news fun and make your advance fun, that tells stories. I mean, this made him accessible. You saw a lot of pictures of people, engaging him, and it made him look much more accessible.
You don't see a lot of that anymore, is your point, right? You just
No.
don't see a lot of that anymore.
Too much.
That sort of spontaneous.
Yeah, very much
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And he a couple times almost looked like he was having a good time.
Yeah. Way in the back there, yeah.
Hello. Sorry, could you talk a little bit about how you coordinate with local governments prior to a campaign visit by a candidate, and then what the dynamic is like during and prior to the visit?
As a rule of thumb, we don't during campaign times, we don't coordinate at all with local governments because it's not official. When we're doing presidential or vice presidential advance, there's a huge amount of coordination with local governments, both for practical reasons and just for courtesy. It's their area, and you do that much more. Members of Congress, certainly, but local mayors, even council people. But during campaigns, not so much with local government, and my relationship with, say, local police is almost non-existent, because that's the Secret Service's bailiwick. Big difference between campaign, when you're really out there on your own, and you're going to deal with the political organizations, obviously.
Yeah, TJ.
Hi, I wanted to ask about, you were talking a little bit before about personality and how that's reflected in terms of the advance team. I remember an article in the Times last spring about how Rubio was doing all these stages to make him look really presidential, and Christie, on the other hand, was doing a lot more of the kind of town hall things where he was in the middle of a group of people and really seemed, like a straight shooter kind of guy. As well as, we all know about Dukakis's famous tank moment. And to what extent do you think that things are a reflection of their personality or trying to accommodate for, a personality flaw that they're trying to overcome?
I think they're trying to go with their strengths. Absolutely. I mean, to the extent that they can. Reporting is suggested, and from what I know, for instance, Secretary Clinton's strengths, small groups, more human interaction. Well, it's tough to do in a situation like this. You're trying to do that as much as you can, and they did more in the primaries, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
But you're trying to go with the candidate's strengths and preferences. Does the candidate prefer to do town hall meetings, prefer that interaction? Does that show off your candidate's personality to the greatest benefit? The problem is with most of us human beings don't come across that well on TV. And it's critical. I mean, and it can be Bernie. It doesn't have to be somebody who's just pretty, some attractive face. Those who have that knack are rare. So trying to move these events and move media coverage around personalities that don't not everybody's Bill Clinton. They can just pick it up and do whatever, is something that the campaign should be doing. Certainly, the Trump campaign, from what I hear, is absolutely going with his preferences. He wants rallies. He doesn't, he's not doing small events. Hillary's probably doing a few more smaller events, and probably more things that are not covered by the media to any great extent. Probably be surprised how many times she has meetings that aren't covered by the media, that are small individual things.
Yeah, Claire?
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. My question comes from, in reading your bio, I noticed that you have done quite a bit of events internationally, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced, as well as some successes that you've had in that regard.
International trips are just a stitch. You just don't know what you're going to get. It's even previous trips to the same area can wind up different just based on the personalities. I've done a lot of Middle East stuff. I happen to be kind of a Middle East guy. My degree is in international affairs and kind of one of those desert-loving English, as they say. And so I've done Jordan and Israel and Saudi Arabia. Been in Damascus for a little bit, in Syria, years ago. It varies. Jordan is obviously very Western-oriented because when I was there, it was King Hussein, who'd been Western-educated. Very welcoming, very warm. This was mid-90s, I guess, 96, 97. You felt, I was staying in more of a Western hotel, and it was like the Holy Land without the bad stuff, being in Jordan. It was a wonderful experience. Saudi Arabia, it's a different culture. How do you say this? 100 years ago. It's a different culture. Just even motorcades in a situation like that, but meeting with the king. There's no set time to meet with the king. You wait around in the middle of the night when people are active, and when the king calls, that's when everybody runs to the motorcade and gets on the motorcade and runs over to the king's residence to meet with the king. It's just, whenever he decides in the middle of the night. Those little fun things, and then there's people driving in motorcades that you really don't know anything about. They just kind of give you one of their 150,000 princes to drive in motorcades. And just the brutal heat of working in the Middle East, especially, people are more active in the nighttime in Saudi Arabia. Israel, we had our own, it was interesting to see the dynamics between the United States and the Israeli government. When they first arrived, there was a discussion when Vice President Gore arrived for the 50th anniversary of the State of Israel. He went to get off the plane, and they wanted to put him in an Israeli car. This has all been negotiated. This is at the last minute. Put him in an Israeli car in the motorcade. And you just don't put the Vice President of the United States or any other president in somebody else's assets, as they say. And he stayed on the plane until he finally got a hold of Bibi Netanyahu. I don't know if this is public or not, but sorry guys. Until it was finally agreed that he was going to be riding in his own car. Interesting little dynamics like that I didn't fully understand the international ramifications of and causes of. Uh, the Middle East is interesting. Russia, God love them. You can understand why they have a strongman form of government, because they don't know how to govern themselves. I had a few weeks there during the Gore-Chernomyrdin Commission meetings, and every time you met with somebody, it'd be at a site or doing something. It was always somebody new, and they always had different answers for you. And it was just the most bizarre set of circumstances that I can imagine. Nobody wanted to take control of anything. Nobody wanted to make a decision. So they tell you one thing one day, and then somebody else tell you something else the next day. So a few days out, I just decided that we were going to take control. We had little things. I had badges made up in Cyrillic that said I'm on Vice President Gore's staff. And I can't remember what it was, but it was the whole thing we could show to people in Cyrillic. And we literally controlled the whole event when at the President, called the President Hotel in Moscow. They had signings, they had meetings, they had a press conference, and we ran the show, and nobody minded. We decided what rooms they're going to be in and how they're going to set them up, and it was just bizarre to me. Nobody minded. Nobody said anything. At one point, we needed some time to reset a room for a press conference, and I didn't want Chernomyrdin to go anywhere, so I controlled him because he wouldn't leave Gore, excuse me. He wouldn't leave Gore, so I had Gore say, we're going to stand here for 10 minutes, because if you stand here, he's going to stand here, and I don't want him going in there. And he said, okay. So we stood and talked. International trips are fun. And when I did France for Barack Obama in the summer of July of 2008, my last name was quite a thing for them. I pronounce it, well, that is the first name around here. Yes, I know that. It's Jacques, but where I come from, I pronounce it Jakes. How about that?
TJ?
Thank you for spending some of your time with us and sharing with us. Can you give us a couple of stories about when you were the most scared and a couple of stories about when you were the most pleased?
Scared is all the time when I was a kid doing this, worried that I was going to be found out. 76, the entire campaign. I was a kid. I was just a kid. And the whole campaign, I was scared. You're always worried, because all they have to do is not call you back. After one trip, all they have to do is not call you to send you on the next trip. They don't have to fire you. They don't have to just not send you out again. Well, you wait for that phone call. Are they going to call? Before the last trip's over. You get older and you get more comfortable. Thank goodness that doesn't occur. But every instant of every day in '76, I was scared down to my toenails doing Jimmy Carter. And some of the things that we were responsible for doing just was stunning to me as a kid. Most pleased, you just can't get over having a successful huge rally. The Liberty Memorial rally. But then there's always something that you look at. There's always something that you look at that keeps you less than pleased. The Liberty Memorial rally, I could have had more people if I could have done it down on the ground in front of Union Station.
Oh, yeah.
But there was some supposed big Democrat, I never heard of before, whose daughter was getting married and had rented Union Station, and I didn't want to mess up her wedding. It didn't make any difference but they said some big Democrat. I never heard of him. So I went up on top. Well, I could have had the biggest event of the campaign, but for that, placement. Same thing for years, ever since I was a kid. I wanted to do the big Labor Day rally for the president or a presidential candidate in Detroit, in Cadillac Square. Truman had been there. Kennedy had been there. I wanted to do Labor Day, in Cadillac Square in Detroit. I didn't even ask. They gave it to me. It was for Barack in '08. I run to Detroit. I get to Cadillac Square, and it's just god-awful. High rises everywhere that are just abandoned. Secret Service, thousands and thousands of windows that I know the Secret Service can't possibly, secure. And just the lay of the land was awful. It was just, but and the Secret Service, I'm there, so we're going to get there to Cadillac Square. Secret Service is doing this number. I just walked over to him. I said, don't even worry about it. I had to do an event. I could have had 100,000 people. It was the end of the parade on Labor Day. And I had to do it downtown at a site that I could fit 12,000 people in, because that's the site that I could get that was near there, or I could have had the other biggest event of the entire campaign. So there's always something. And on the same day that we did Liberty Memorial, my friend Jean-Michel Pichet, in my hometown of St. Louis, talked people into doing a rally under the arch, which I'm not sure I would have even had the guts to ask for, because I've asked in the past, and they said no. But they got permission. He's from Canada. He got permission. He did the biggest one in my hometown, in my arch. I did the 25th anniversary of the arch. I was there when it was built, and he got the event. So there's always something to kind of needle you to say, well, it wasn't quite as good as it could have been. And the day that they did St. Louis, and then they came to Kansas City to do that event at the Liberty Memorial. I was having Obama sign one of the big posters that I'd gotten. I waited the whole campaign. And he signed in this thing, and he goes, we had 100,000 people in St. Louis and 80,000 people here. Can I go home? And Axelrod said, it doesn't work like that, sir. And he signed it, Steve, couldn't have done it without you. I said, yeah, well, okay, fine. We'll see what that means in cold, hard reality.
How about like just one or two more here? Yeah.
How is it like working for, do you know somebody who has worked for Hillary, and how is it like being on a staff?
For who?
Hillary.
Surprisingly, I haven't been around her and her staff that much. With all the events that I did with the president, she was only on one trip that I did with President Clinton, and it had happened to be Independence, Missouri. It was the Healthcare Express, Healthcare 94, and had a rally in downtown Independence, and she came for that. I've got a lovely photo of when he was thanking me after the event with Tipper and Al in the back eating Gates barbecue off the platter. You see their backs. They didn't put it on. They just hunched over. Anyway, that's the only time I was really around her. I got the strong impression that between the two candidates in 2007 to 2008, that Secret Service liked my guy better, but maybe I may have been biased about that. But we had a good reputation with Secret Service, which really made our lives a lot better in 2008. And it was noticeable because they were not, I don't know, they didn't like him, but they were not with Kerry in 2004. They were with the president. And you could tell a difference. They were a little bit more strict. You couldn't get away with this quite as much. That kind of thing helps quite a bit. So depending on, what those relationships are now, and frankly, I haven't been around them enough to know. I'm hoping that it's all going to be okay. They have a large staff. It's very interesting to work with the entire Clinton staff. It is unique in American politics now, and I think ever, that they have been around so long, that they have a huge number of people who've been with them for a long, long time. And that's a fairly set bureaucracy that moves with them when they move. That's how I would call it. I hope that turns out to be a good thing. They certainly have a lot of experts that are going to go with them. If she wins the White House, they have a lot of bodies they can turn to who know a lot about a lot of things, but it can also make life kind of interesting when you're trying to work with them.
Claire, you got any more? Yeah. Last one.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, so you have accepted speaking engagements, or so it says in your bio, and I wanted to know, as a self-proclaimed curmudgeon, what are some suggestions you have for when we are hosting speakers, and what are some of your most enjoyable speaking engagements that you've accepted?
Here? What I can tell you about here for hosting speakers, or anywhere?
You personally.
Oh.
Places where you've spoken.
I tell you what, Bill Lacey taught me everything I know about hosting speakers in this sense, in terms of a place like this. You want to ask somebody who knows what they're doing, Bill and the people who do this here on a regular basis. You guys do it wonderfully. Speakers show up because they want to. If they're getting paid, then you don't have to worry about it as much. If it's because, somebody like me, it's because they want to. And just asking them will give you everything you're going to want to know if they need something special. Having a good-sized crowd, having a wonderfully engaged audience makes a difference. Having a media star as the host to draw people, even a member of the corrupt national media, somebody would say. How does that work anyway? Do you guys have like meetings or something, or a secret handshake for this conspiracy? Or?
Well, in the book, you describe the traveling press corps as, quote, generally ruthless all the time. They know no bounds other than physical force.
No, that's the international press. That's the international press. No, very specific. Domestic press, no problem. International press, they truly don't know anything but physical force. I mean, I did election night primary of 2004 with Kerry in Wisconsin. It was John Kerry and his wife after the speech, went down to shake hands, and a guy from Italy, a cameraman, jumped off the cutaway platform and into the buffer and almost hit Teresa, Heinz Kerry. And
that would not have been good.
And a wonderful guy who was the press wrangler, who is not intimidated in the least, said, "Hey, watch it." And the guy said something very rude back to him. beginning with an F. And everybody, I mean, we were all sick. It was, you know, it just had been a long evening. The next thing I see is a long press platform for the stage. I'm at one end. The carries are out at the far end, 60 feet away, when this happens, and I'm at this far end with a long ramp at the end for, we had the Secretary of the VA, former senator from Georgia, because he had a wheelchair. Anyway, I hear this commotion. I look down, and from about 60 feet away, the press wrangler has got this, this Italian guy with his camera by the nape of the neck, and he's screaming at him in his face and pushing him the entire way across the front of this just screaming at him. And he goes right past me and all the way down to where the end of the ramp was. And then we had firefighters kind of as our volunteers at the end, these kind of big burly guys. And he takes him, he literally throws him. He says, "Get this son of a bitch out of here," and throws him, get him out of here. I mean, that's the national press. During the primaries, a lot of times you got to deal with that. And if you're doing international trips, that's another thing you have to be wary of. They know physical force. You sometimes have to physically keep them from doing what you don't want them to do.
Okay.
So
Steve
I
J-
apologize, I don't have a better answer for that. I've always had such good experiences. I'm not very critical about these things. The speakers that I have are people that, are getting media coverage. So, it's a little bit different deal than, schmucks like us.
Well, Steve Jacques' book is titled Advanced Man, A Presidential Campaign Adventure. Let's give him a big round of applause for being here today. Good job. Just briefly, next week we have three of the best political analysts anywhere here in the Midwest. Dave Helling, Burdett Loomis from KU, Bob Beatty from Washburn will be here to talk about where the presidential campaign sits as of a week from now. So next week, 4 o'clock, we'll be here again. Thanks for coming today. See you then.
Thank you. Well, this had to be the most brilliant group of people I've ever talked in front of.